Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to have that 30 seconds of weird silence while everybody joins the room. I hope everyone's had a good Thursday. It's nearly the weekend, and the sun is currently shining, although it's been a bit of a funny day. Soups, how are you doing?
Thanks, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I can tell everybody who's coming into the room that we've already been having an awesome chat, so we're in for a treat today. Priscilla, welcome to the team. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining. Hels, hello there.
Hiya, how are you?
Very good. And the lovely Dina, how are things? All right?
I am good, thank you for inviting me. Hi guys.
Hello there. I am frantically going to try and turn off my Teams alerts because it's going crazy at the moment and it's annoying me. So therefore, it's probably annoying you. We're just waiting for the brilliant Maria. Oh, Maria, how are you doing?
Yeah, sorry. I feel I'm chronically late. I have a good excuse, but I won't go into it.
Is it worth hearing? Is it that good an experience to hear it?
We've got a puppy, and we had to do the transfer of puppy so that I'm not attacked for most of this call.
That's
attacked
good.
with love and licking. Kisses.
Did we get to see the puppy? Did we get
no,
to say hello?
No, he's firmly in the other room and I have to be away. So yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, we'll give it 30 more seconds for everyone to join and then we shall begin. Thanks everybody for joining. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Okay. That looks like Ribena, Maria.
Sorry, it's Pepsi Max. I'm just on caffeine at the moment because we're sleeping on the sofa in rotation with the puppy.
Okay.
Got a lot of makeup on, which is why I look vaguely human.
No, you look great. Don't worry about that at all. It's making me want to drink now.
Oh my God, seriously, we've been through more wine than I think ever. It's just because we've got one child and we're not having another one. He's 10, right? Never, no, done. Don't want to go back to the sleepless nights. They're having to like toilet, all of that. And then we were like, yes, let's get a puppy. Like, obviously it's exactly the same thing. Yeah. And now I'm like, but obviously he's delightful. He's gorgeous. We love him. But I'm, not having another puppy ever again.
Wine helps a lot of things though, Maria. So I think you're onto a win. So yes.
Perfect. Yeah. Root that. All right then, guys. Well, I think everybody's here now. So I'll just kick us off by saying, hope everyone's having a great afternoon and thank you for joining. I think I know a lot of you. For those of you I don't know, I'm Liam from the Seven Stars. And I guess welcome to March's Me for Matters. So Media for All was set up in 2017 by a brilliant bloke called Narendra Patel. And our aim as an organisation is really about recruiting and retaining people from Black, Asian and other minority ethnic communities within the advertising industry. And alongside those two pillars, we also really want to focus on how we can help people of colour to rise within the industry. We know that people's lived experience isn't the same. We know that when you at an awards do, when you're in the office, when we finally get back there, you look around and there aren't enough people that look like us in positions of influence. And that's something that we are looking to change. And Me for Matters as a platform was really about that. So it's really about having open conversations, having open discussions where there isn't that fear about saying the wrong thing or using the wrong language or using the wrong words. It's all about that authenticity and people coming from a great place, wanting to learn more, wanting to be part of the solution, because we know that all of us together can only solve this. It can't be one community or it can't be one set of people. We've all got to come together and help drive the equality that we all need so badly within the advertising industry. And I guess since we last spoke at the end of February, we're looking towards March and International Women's Day. We're positive about it. And it's, I guess the word interesting absolutely underplays it, but it's been an interesting March, right? So on one side, you've got the vaccination effort, which is flying. That mighty NHS are absolutely doing what the our government failed to in terms of absolutely driving the vaccinations and beating the virus, which means hopefully very soon we're going to emerge from this winter hibernation or lockdown. I might even be able to get this Barnet sorted out at some point. But actually, when you look back at what March has also been, it's been a really, really difficult month for people of colour. And specifically, it's been a difficult month for women, right? We witnessed that terrible, unfolding of of the bullying or the gaslighting of Meghan Markle and the interview with Oprah, and you know how her experience was within an institution that is really resistant to change. And we talked about that when we talked about the small acts and the police force. We've talked about that in loads of different organisations, that institutional resistance, that institutional racism, and seeing it played out there was really sad to see. And I guess so was the arguments about whether it was real or did she really experience it. And I mean, I'm really trying not to swear on these, but so I'll move on. But that was really hard to watch. And on top of that, we had the continued violence against women in society, right? So we had the really awful murder of Sarah Everard. And then when women got together and men got together to absolutely hold those vigils against it, the police went out with a disproportionate amount of violence in the face of that was just absolutely disgusting to watch and unfold. And I did a bit of digging, and you're going to hear from people much better than me talk about this today. But when you look at the stats regarding violence against women, it's absolutely awful. So Blessing Olusegun, and I know I said her surname wrong, I got it right every other time I practiced it, but she was found dead on a Sussex beach at the end of last year. There's been a massive rise in domestic abuse through lockdown, and the stats are really depressing, right? And actually, when you look at the stats for the last 5 to 10 years, a woman is killed in the UK normally by a bloke every 3 days, and it's awful, and things have to change. And speaking to lots of women in work, family, friends, you know, they're really angry, they're pissed off, they're sad, they're upset, and lots of them are triggered, right? So when we think about the fact that International Women's Day was less than 3 weeks ago, it's a bit of an indictment in how far we've got to go in our society. So you know, today's Me for Matters is really going to be a celebration of brilliant women in advertising, how women can help women, how men can help and level the playing field, and what it takes to be a brilliant ally. But we don't want to ignore the fact that some of these things have happened, and it's really hard and really difficult. So as always, we're going to face into some of that chat, and you're going to hear about that today. You're also going to hear from, you know, brilliant women from the ad industry. So we're going to hear their take on everything. International Women's Day, we're going to hear tangible advice, and hopefully at the end of the hour, end of the 53 minutes now, we're going to feel a bit more motivated, we're going to know a bit more what we can do to help, and we're all going to understand a bit more about how we do our bit to drive that equity within the industry and within society wider, right? This isn't just about advertising, this is about the world we live in, right? This is a safeguarding safe space, and I guess you know, we always announce this, but I guess today we might be touching on topics that are difficult for people. So the brilliant guys at NABS have an advice line. I'm going to drop that into the chat box. So if anyone feels triggered or wants help or needs support or wants help with some of these issues that we talk about, get in touch with NABS. They're brilliant and they can really help you out. Talking about today's awesome panel, we have brilliant guys here. We've got the awesome Soups. Hiya, Soups. So Soups is the commercial director at the agency Forward PMX, and as well as leading their D&I program, she's also a brilliant MEFA and Bloom mentor, and she's also the director of outreach at MEFA, and is absolutely driving what we do at Media Fraud to get us out there and to reach out and touch some of those new people that we want to bring in to our organisation. Alongside Soups, you have the awesome Maria. Hello, Maria, and her puppy hidden away in a room somewhere. So good to see you. Thank you for joining. Maria joined us last year, and currently she's the head of talent acquisition, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Very long title at the Telegraph Media Group, but she's got a brand new shiny job, and she's soon to be moving to Facebook as head of international diversity recruiting. Smaller title, brilliant, bigger job. So congratulations on that. Joining those guys, we have Priscilla. So Priscilla is a Brixton Finishing School grad, and she's soon to be a planner at BCCP. Priscilla's worked at Adam and Eve, DDB, and Bauer Media, and she helps brands create work that people outside the industry want to talk about. And I was judging awards today, and I know that quite often we get caught up in media inward looking, and actually I love that, you know, ambition of creating work that people outside of media and advertising talk about, because actually that's the real world, that's what people see. So hi Priscilla, thank you for joining. We have the brilliant Helen Rose, who's one of the managing partners at the awesome agency 7 Stars. I guess I'm a little bit biased. She's one of the founding partners of Voices for All and is also a Bloom mentor. And Helen is one of the driving forces of equality at our agency. So hiya, Hels. And last but definitely not least, we have Dina, and Dina's the Client Service Director at Creative Equals, and is a 2021 co-head of allyship and founder of Blooming Colour. And I've heard from a number of people that Dina's intro last week, or earlier this week, about the upcoming year was absolutely inspirational and brilliant. So we're really pleased that Dina could join us. So Thank you everyone for joining today. If we've got any questions as we go through, please drop your questions in the Q&A box. You can either do it anonymously, you can put your name in it, and we'll give you a shout out. Absolutely, we want you guys to be involved and ask questions as we go along, and that's what today's about learning together, about talking and going from there. You've definitely heard enough from me. So we're going to get on with the show, and we're going to start with Suits. So Suits, I've got quite I say it in a sentence, but obviously I don't mean in a sentence, but in a nutshell, could you tell me your experience of International Women's Day this year? Like, what's your overriding feeling? What conversation you've been having with your mates, with female friends, but also, I guess, what conversation you've been having with male colleagues and family and people around you as well? How's that been for you?
So that I can't do in a sentence, and I think everyone here would agree with me that International Women's Day week, month has been quite a roller coaster of emotions for most of us. Now, when we approach International Women's Day, and as we do every year, it's about looking at how we've been progressing women, how how progress has been made, and it's all quite an optimistic view on things. And so we had a number of events lined up for our people. We did a panel on intersectionality and heard amazing women talk about their experiences as intersectional women, and that was reflective, and some of those stories were quite challenging, but also there's a lot of optimism in it because they've all been really, really successful in what they've been doing, and so brilliant role models that we heard from. We also talked about the progress that we'd made as a business, and everyone was kind of like patting themselves on the back. Of course, that evening we then had revelations from Meghan Markle. I just put her name together there, apologies for that. But Meghan kind of told us her story, told the world her story, and the bullying and the gaslighting that she endured. And I know that my WhatsApp feed was on fire with the reactions from all of my colleagues and my friends, and the disappointment that they were all feeling from all of that. And then, you touched on the Sarah Everard case, and that turned from a disappearance into murder, and it was all very disappointing again. So there was a whole roller coaster of emotions, and what it did is, it almost felt like we'd taken 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back with it all. The good thing is that a lot of male colleagues did actually step up, and one of them actually said, I want to write out to the business and talk about how we can keep women safe. And I also listened to some TED Talks where actually the narrative is what we need to really focus on. International Women's Day focuses on women, but actually the focus needs to be on men championing women, or men changing the way in which they are interacting with us. So I think it was a very, very intense International Women's Day for me and the women that I've been talking to in particular. And I know that my colleagues on the call here as well have had similar reflections on International Women's Day.
Thanks, Soups. I think almost unanimously what we've heard is that people's belief of progress, people's optimism, and I think everyone was so keen to have said goodbye to 2020, or what people are now calling Q5 2020, and so pleased to be going, that's gone. And I guess that you called it before we started, that roller coaster of emotions of going, yeah, it's great, but I know we've got so far to go. Oh no, we really have got so far to go. And I guess, I think the description of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, absolutely everything we talk about in terms of equality is so often the case. And I think we'll definitely, when we hear from Dina, I think we'll hear about that allyship. And, it's great to hear so many men coming to you, well, what do I do? How can I help? And that kind of collective rage, not collective rage, collective, desire to help and, turn that situation around. Maria, so congrats on a new role, and congrats on a new puppy as well. You're changing everything at the same time. So what I wanted to ask you, and I guess, you're in a really interesting place, right? So in your current world, which I guess is news publishing, and your future world, which is going to be more social and more people co-creating, and, they're people-based news, if you call it that. And when you look at how the coverage of Meghan played out, and you've got the newspapers going, we've never been racist, don't know what you're talking about. And then you look at some of those front covers, and all of a sudden it's just like a whole who's to blame culture. And you've got people going, well, did you really feel that? And did you not? And everyone's missing the point, right? How it seems to draw parallels for women of colour everywhere. And I wonder, in what you're starting to do, or in your new role, how do you see that playing out, and what are your thoughts, really?
Good question. So obviously as an employee, I'm going to be quite careful about what I say. I think what's very interesting about the way that we talk about women as a culture, as an English culture, is something that plays out in the media, right? And we're willing to accept it because we keep reading and we keep clicking and we keep buying. And I was listening to a really good TED talk on a completely different topic. It's called You're Wrong About, and it's by two journalists, and it looks at kind of maligned women in history. Everyone from I'm just trying to think. They do a very good series on Diana. They did one on Janet Jackson and the nipple flash, and how society treats women, and how society talks about women, how society and the media views women, and what we find easy to believe about women, and what we find easy to believe about women of colour specifically. And we find it very easy to believe that Meghan is privileged, and she undoubtedly is, in terms of her schooling, in terms of her career. She's beautiful. She's married to a prince. Privilege does not make you exempt from racism, and I think that's really key, right? Particularly in the industries that we're working in. By merit of being here, we have some sort of sense of privilege, right? We work for great companies, we work in a great industry, but that doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist. Just because we're civilized and genteel and we work in nice offices in central London, it doesn't mean that these things don't happen. You talked about gaslighting, and I think whatever you feel about Meghan Markle, and I'm not a particular fan, and I didn't follow her before, and I don't really follow royal stuff. Whatever you feel about her, you can feel the sense is palpable that she feels like there's a countrywide conspiracy telling her that racism didn't happen. And as a Black woman, I felt that, where you absolutely know that something impacted you, and everybody around you is going, no, that didn't happen. And you kind of think, well, then if we're so willing to believe as a society that doesn't happen to people like us or by people like us, then how do you progress that conversation, right? White Fragility is an excellent book that I think everyone should read. And I think a lot of this comes down to white fragility and societal fragility. England, Britain has a very specific viewpoint of its place in history, and some of the historical things that England have done do not sit well with that. There's a reason that the empire became the Commonwealth. It was to try and kind of skim over some of the atrocities that happened. So I'll circle back to my original point. I think by making it very easy to believe things about certain types of people, you take away their individual experience, their lived experience, and you take away their humanity. And if we all had a little bit more empathy and probably a little bit more impulse control in terms of our reactions to what people are claiming and what people are saying, then these conversations will be a lot easier. I have forgotten your original question, but I could do a TED talk on this, so I'm going to
I think we might have to do a TED talk on it, but do you know what you answered the question as you always do so eloquently, Mira, and I think your whole point about, is how society talks about women, and then how we as a society how we can progress without accepting that fragility, right? And you talk about the complicity, everybody sits there complaining about the press or complaining about such, but or buying certain brands, but people fall over themselves to still do those things, right? So I guess there's that complicity, and there's the lack of empathy. And I guess if we can work out a way to bridge both of those things, we maybe get to a better place where we're not having discussions about whether she did or did not experience it. We empathize that she obviously did, because no one else can tell us how Meghan was feeling apart from Meghan, and then we can move on about how we change the conversation. And I think that's absolutely at the center of your answer, and I think that's why I think it's brilliantly answered. I guess going to Priscilla, what I find really interesting is a brilliant, bright, Brixton Finishing School is an awesome organisation doing brilliant things. And you've already had some brilliant experience at Bauer, at Adam and Eve. You're about to go to VCCP in 2 weeks, right, Priscilla? So, to be a planner, it sounds super exciting. I wondered, and this is not calling any of us old, because I'm obviously the oldest one here, but in terms of, sorry about the sirens, I guess, how did you experience the advertising industry, right? What are your hopes and dreams for it? What's the positives? What are the things that really annoy you? And I guess I just wonder, is your experience slightly different to some of ours?
Well, I think in terms of expectations, it's just that the talents of all people are used and that we're provided opportunities to grow and that men and women are able to work shoulder to shoulder, which I don't know is the case. And I think any experience which means that women can't step into their potential, there needs to be an intolerance to. And intolerance is the main thing. Like, people really need to actively stand up and step up to make sure that a change happens, because from what I've seen so far, and I hate to sound critical, but it feels like we're in a place of tokenism. And by that, I mean, people are responding to the pressures and protests that are coming up from people within the industry. But what they're not doing is looking at it as the beginning of something long term. And like, how are we going to make sure that this industry becomes a place where people like myself come in and have the psychological safety, the remuneration and the pathways to success that are necessary. So that's my personal expectation. In terms of the successes, like obviously Brixton Finishing School, there is a group, like a girls' WhatsApp group that brings me so much comfort. Like, before coming onto this panel, I popped in a message and all the girls came back like, you can do this. And it was just good vibes and good energy. And I think that's why a program like Brixton Finishing School is so important, because it's brought together a group of people who are all interested in the same thing, connected across like account management through to creative, that can just collaborate and is a go-to safe space. But yeah, I think those are sort of the main things.
No, thank you, Priscilla. And do you know what, when you talk about two things you talk about there, that the Brixton Finishing School experience and a sense of, creating a group of people who've got your back, who you fall over, they'll pick you up. And like Supri's saying, our MIFA WhatsApp group, I blinked for a second on the night that the Meghan thing was on, and there was about 100,000 responses. But your whole point about how do people step up and stand up, it starts with people around you, right? It starts off with people having your back and knowing you've got the emotional and physical security to be able to be who you want to be, right? So we talk on this panel sometimes and people go, oh, well, be who you want to be, or fake it to make it, and all that stuff. And actually some of that is true, some of it is BS, because more sirens, because essentially you should be yourself, and but you can only be yourself if you've got that bunch of people around you who've stood up and stepped up to support you on that. And I guess, Hels, we've got you on today, and thanks for joining. One of the things that we wanted to talk about was, how do we go about changing the experience of women in society, but I guess through an ad industry lens, that's where we're all from. And then why does it take so long to drive that change? So why is violence against women so pervasive? How do we flip it? How do we get it from that doom loop to that positive cycle that we need to kick into?
Well, there's multiple questions and issues to address in that one. So it's quite a big topic to tackle. But Maria's actually already touched on it, because I think one of the best places to start is a lot of the actions and the debate that we've all had to witness over the past few weeks is actually underpinned by the historical lived experience of women, the attitudes to women in modern society. And those perceptions of women, of gender as a whole, they're subconscious. They've been preconditioned over time. This isn't, it's not something which is kind of new. And actually, until you unpick some of those subconscious perceptions, that's how you then really start to understand what current culture's view on women or any type of gender in society is, and where it actually comes from. And I guess if we're kind of being really honest with ourselves as well as about an ad industry, we've kind of got quite a lot to answer for in terms of the way that the portrayal of women specifically in some of those advertising narratives has been fairly stereotyped and not that positive in many kind of shapes and forms, right? And we're talking about quite recent stuff. So if you even think about 1950s and 1960s advertising, it was all about, you know, the oppressed sort of stay-at-home housewife woman. Then if you think about the 70s and 80s, it moved on to the sort of overtly sexualized, you know, females, the, you know, perfectionism of what a woman should look like. And brands have used gender as a positioning tool. So the feminine type, you know, branding was always about, you know, something was nurturing, soft, you know, maternal, nurturing, or weaker. Whereas for the sort of masculine positioning, it would be about something which is independent, bold, strong, brave. And so, you know, it's kind of laughable to us now, I think, when we sit here and think about stuff like that, you know, the kind of the masculine typical identifiers there. I'm like, that describes all of the females that I know. That's not, those are not masculine traits. Those are not solely a masculine trait. And I think this is what's then perpetuated in the media. So, you know, we kind of started to touch on this, but even just thinking about the way that the media has presented the war, or that kind of catfight, if you like, which I don't even know if it exists, but between Meghan and Kate. And it's that kind of, you know, there's something about how people really like to hang on to some kind of stereotype that yet again perpetuates this image of what women should be or what they were. And I think that's where the experience of women in today's society is coming from. That's what all those women are rallying about at the moment. That's what people feel really pissed off about. That's what I feel pissed off about. Sorry, I know we're not meant to be swearing. But, you know, obviously, right, there's loads more positive, relevant, inclusive, modern portrayals of women now in society. That's much more commonplace. But I think it is quite interesting that even the Advertising Standards Authority, it was only in 2019 that they had a new code around banning ads that must not include gender stereotypes that would either likely cause harm or offence. That was 2019. The Beachbody Ready advert, which I'm sure we can all remember, the girl in the yellow bikini, that was 2015. Like, this is stuff which is quite recent. This is where, you know, in terms of what are those perceptions of women and where are those kind of challenges coming from, it's recent history. I don't want to sound like I'm being too negative, so I think to address the second half of your question, Liam, is what needs to change. Is the great news is that subconscious perceptions and stereotypes can be reconditioned, right? You can evolve that story, it can change. Gender itself is an evolving story. We kind of touched on it before in our chat, but, you know, it's not this binary, you know, concept of male versus female. It's actually much more nuanced than that. There's a spectrum, right? Gender is fluid to people today. But I think the thing that we need to be honest about is that it takes quite a long time for those stereotypes to truly be broken down and to actually change in people's subconscious. What I found really interesting was really in the news recently was the CEO of Bumble, so Whitney Wolf Herd, who was talked about in the press for being, you know, she's super successful, an entrepreneur. She's now the youngest self-made billionaire. Like, amazing, right? Incredible. But she was, in those articles, she was constantly referenced to her motherhood and to her gender. And I find that really interesting because I don't believe that would have been the case if she was a man. I don't think she would have been talked about as a successful male entrepreneur. And, you know, should we celebrate and call out female success? Absolutely, yes. But should that calling out of that success be comparable and equal to the way that we would do if it was a man? Absolutely, yes. I don't believe that, you know, if that was a man, his gender and his kids would have been mentioned in those articles. So it's kind of, you know, that for me, I find it quite challenging because in some way it's celebratory, but equally it's like it just doesn't sit quite right, you know? I feel like I'm rambling, but I think there's some really interesting things in terms of the actionable change. And I think it is about having brilliant role models, because I think, you know, it's about how all genders represented and then celebrated equally. So, you know, that's not just a top level, it's across the board that you should, you know, see and recognize and celebrate that success and those types of role models all around you. And I think that's where it's about everyday actions, because everyday actions will actually drive change. And by that I mean it shouldn't just be women that support women, it needs to be everybody that supports everybody. And the fact that again, this has been mentioned already, but gender and the equality of gender is an intersectional issue. It's, you know, it's much more complex than just, you know, do women have equal rights? There's so much more about, you know, how do we make sure we give attention and inclusivity across the board and to all marginalised groups, and also within that, women.
Thanks.
No,
do you know what? I did ask 3 questions in one, so it's absolutely fair. I got 3 answers. And I think the most interesting thing, I think, is about that we have conditioned society to think in that way. Now, you know, you get, you know, a biologist on here and they'll go, no, it's because of this, it's because of that. But the truth is how we show up, and it's what Priscilla was talking a little bit about, it's like how things show up, how we represent communities, how we represent each other is what people see, and that's therefore what they take out of it. And I think you're absolutely right. The CEO, successful entrepreneur, is a successful entrepreneur, if I can say the word, who happens to be a woman. She's not a woman successful entrepreneur, and I think that's really interesting, as is your point about it's the stuff we do and it's how we show up. And I guess for Dina, I think that is where what you're driving and how you've, you know, some of the things you're talking about and are really resonating, Dina, around that allyship. And again, in the chat before, you were talking about the power of it. And I wondered, is that a big part of how we start to change perception, start to unpick some of this stuff? Is that what we think will help solve it? What do you think, Dina?
Good question. So for me, I feel like the words ally and allyship have certainly become more and more prevalent in our daily conversations, definitely in the last year. Which for the first instance, it feels great. Like it's like, oh great, there's someone who's new coming to support this, and it's amazing. But I think that we need to be really clear around the dangers of that term. So in the definition of allyship, it's often a person from a dominant group who is working to dismantle the form of privilege their group receives. So for instance, if we're looking at white people supporting Black Lives Matter, or straight people supporting LGBT plus rights, which is all good. But should the focus be on you as the individual, such as I'm saying I'm an ally of XYZ, seems problematic. When it comes to societal change, the focus must be on the work that you're doing with others as part of a movement, rather than who you think you are. So in essence, would you be doing the work regardless of the label? Because it's not about you, it's more about driving for equity. Allyship isn't it's really hard. It's not an easy thing to do. It's holding yourself constantly accountable all of the time. It's, will you challenge a family member who makes homophobic or racist comments every single time? It's, if you're a man and you have a male boss and it's just used to, are you prepared to challenge any sexist comment that they make, whether there's someone around or not, if it's just used to? And challenging people from the same identity group is the most challenging but important element of being an ally. So for me, active allyship is doing the work all of the time, even when it feels invisible. And I think it's really key that we remember that, because otherwise then my question always is it performative, right? So if we look at Bloom, so I'm the co-founder of Bloom in Colour with Elizabeth, who's a MIFA member in here today, hi. And we're also co-heads of allyship, which is a new role within the leadership team at Bloom. What we're doing is, it's not about, oh, okay, it's Black History Month, that's only for Bloom in Colour, that's only for our women of colour members. It's about, it's Black History Month. How do we move from this just being about our Black voices within the network to a collaborative approach on what we're doing and how we're doing that together for the benefit of all? And I think that doesn't always, that's not our first reaction, right? We need to be challenged on that. I think it's really easy to think, oh, okay, so it's Pride Month in June. That means that we need to give that the voice, the only voice that should be heard are people from the Pride group. No, if you're an ally, it's about sharing and promoting and supporting from what you've done. Yeah, it's not oh okay, I support them, so I'm gonna give them that avenue to have that voice. It's about always on. I'm always on their cause is always on, the change that's needed is always on. And it is difficult. To go back to what Serp said earlier about when we were talking about Meghan Markle, there was my WhatsApp was going off because I know exactly what she's talking about. I've been in many work positions where I've experienced basically crap onboarding. There is no, I am the only in the room, whether that be female and a Black woman. Therefore, the support system around me is not that to really elevate and support me. It can be tokenism. It could feel like, oh, I'm an ally because, you know, I've got a black woman on my team. That doesn't make you an ally. You want me there despite me being Black, but also believing I should be there. And it doesn't matter that she's Black. Does that make sense? It shouldn't all just be me. It has to be, I want her there, not because it makes me look better, not because it means that I'm championing her cause, but she should be there. So I'm going to do the work to support that. And I think that doesn't always resonate when people are saying, oh, I'm an ally. It's about, oh, I'm doing the right thing. I'm the good person. So yeah, it's not that, and I'm not saying that anyone's a bad person. I don't want loads of hate. I'm saying that be intentional and be consistent with the work that you do. I think that 2 books that really, really solidify what I'm saying and should be great reference points on this is How to Be an Anti-Racist Ally by Sophie Williams, but also out next week is What White People Can Do Next, Allyship to Coalition from Emma Debreri, which I saw her speak last week and completely online with, in this space, and when we talk about diversity, equity and inclusion, terminology and our stance on terminology is ever growing. So when we talk about allyship, let's move forward to coalition and collaboration, and that is an always on thing. So I hope that's answered the question.
No, do you know what? It totally has. And, you know, it's not, everything we talk about today isn't a simple one-word answer, right? And I think that is why sometimes people shy away from, not anyone on here, but generally people are worried about having those conversations, right? I was sat in a room with somebody in my bubble I should probably have before I get a load of hate, and they didn't agree. They thought, oh, you know, isn't it terrible why they put the royal family? And it's so hard to sit there with someone who's a mate and explain to them why they're fucking wrong, right? Now I should be swearing, but I am. So I think you're right. It's that always on, the ability to challenge people who might be from your same experience, might not be, but having that conversation. And I really like how you talk about what did you say? It's not about allyship, it's about a coalition. It's about coalition, and I love that. And do you know what the next question, and Soups, I'm going to ask you to help me answer this one, right, which is about tokenism. And you know, one of the awards I was judging today, a piece of work, I'm going to be really careful not to give it away, but a piece of work got called out, and the insinuation was it was put forward, they did it because it was tokenistic, because they looked good for doing it. And I kind of, and I'm struggling to articulate it because I don't want to be overly overt about what it was, but essentially I had to call it out and go, you can't then call people out for investing money to support this cause, because they're at least they're doing something for it, right? So again, there's this whole piece about, you know, people look around and they go, okay, I want one of those, I want one of those. That is tokenistic. But if people are doing the right thing from the right place, maybe that is, I don't know. Soups, help me answer this question better. How do you call out tokenistic behavior? What does that look like? And why do we fall into that trap?
I think the first thing to ask yourself is how do you identify tokenism, right? Because I think there's a fine line, and it can be quite difficult for individuals to actually call it out, because sometimes you're going, well, it's a start, right? And they're making a start. It's not tokenism. And I think the key thing is to first go, you know, if you're talking about someone being promoted, so often you all of a sudden see, you know, females being promoted all of a sudden into senior positions because they want to increase representation. Great, that's brilliant. And I would never want a female not to be promoted. However, do they deserve that job? Do they have the skills to do that job? You know, has the right person been promoted into that position, even if they are female? Those are the kind of first things to start asking. Then it's about, and are they given the tools to do that job properly? because if they're not given the tools to do that job properly, then they're only being promoted into that or put into that position to fill a gap or fill a need within the business that the business has identified, but they're being set up to fail. So, you know, ask yourself that question as well, is, am I being promoted into this because I want this job and that I can do this job? And am I being supported with the right tools and the right mentorship or the right people around me to be able to make me successful? Because if those things are in place, then you can say that the individuals that are doing this have their hearts in the right place and that they really are doing it from a meaningful place. However, if they're not providing that support, if they're not providing the tools, and you're not quite sure why you've been promoted into it, then there's a question around, is there tokenism going on here? And that's really your starting point for starting to unpick where that is happening. And I think, you know, I'll go back to the fact that we are not a diverse industry, whether that's from a gender perspective and even less so from a race perspective or color perspective. So, you know, as an individual of color and a senior person in our business who is of color, I kind of sometimes I have to ask myself that question as well, and I have to justify me being there. And luckily I can justify myself being there. But I think that's the starting point of starting to unpick and starting to identify where tokenism may be happening. And then it's a matter of actually plucking up the courage to have that conversation. If you really do think that there is any semblance of tokenism going on, it's about asking, why has this happened? What are we trying to achieve by doing this? How is this person going to be successful in doing that role? And do we have progression for them as well? Because I think that's really important, career progression. We know that a number of people from you know, Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds fall out at middle management. Women fall out at middle management level because there just doesn't seem to be that career progression. You know, I was having a conversation the other day, and there was that notion of, well, you know, when women take time out for maternity leave, they tend to fall back, and women fall. It's not always the case, right? There are ways in which you can keep women moving forward if your heart is in the right place and if you have the constructs in place to do that. And I think those are the conversations, the questions that employees should be asking of their current employers and future employers, to make sure that the business has really thought about, and the organizations have really thought about, how they tackle potential tokenism that could be happening, but also just in general moving their business forward by moving their people forward. And that is moving their people forward who have the skills and the ability to do that, regardless of their gender and their background. And I think that's how you start to unpick tokenism. But there's a real thin line, I found. It takes a lot of kind of, you know, reflection and thinking and questioning. Questioning is really, really crucial. You need to have the courage to ask the right questions, regardless of how you think someone else is going to take it. Some people may take offense to it because no one wants to be called out for tokenism. Everyone, you know, wants to feel like they're doing the right thing, but if they haven't thought it through, then actually often is coming not quite from the right place.
No, I hear that, and I think it goes back to that authenticity, I guess, but also having a culture or having an environment where you can challenge and you can ask the right questions, and fostering that, I think, is super important. Priscilla, I don't know if you've got any builds on that, or we've had a question from Lucy here around, you know, when you call out business success, or when you call out success, how do you put, you know, marry the gender in the race? So, you know, I think it was Dina or Helen maybe talked about, you know, an entrepreneur versus a successful female entrepreneur versus a successful Black female entrepreneur. You know, how do we think about that, and how do we label success? Is it right to call out and go, absolutely we should celebrate the colour in the race, or absolutely we shouldn't? Or I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
I think it's a conversation to have with the person that you're speaking about. And I think that's sometimes where it often gets missed. Like, I, for instance, might be called into a brief, and you get in there and quite quickly feel that the reason why you're in the room is because I'm a young Black female. And there's so much more nuance to my experience. Like, bring me into the room, because I spent the last 2.5 years working with young people at a youth club, and that I have those insights that I can feed in could be really valuable. But it's about getting to know the people that you're bringing into the room, as opposed to just seeing them as a demographic. And I think we spend so much time in our industry talking about the audiences we're trying to speak to. We're really experienced in getting that really granular understanding. And so that same courtesy should be extended to the people who are behind the work.
Yeah, I get that, because it's like, find out why you want someone in a room. It's got to be more than just because of their one thing or another thing. It's like, what is it about their experience? Because not one person has the same lived experience. And I guess it's, how do people have the confidence to find out more about you and about me and about what we're going to bring to the party and what our experience says that's different, versus a load of people that look the same. There was a joke on Twitter. It says, if you show me two, I won't tell the joke exactly as it was. It's basically two people who look exactly the same in a room agreeing about the same thing. One of them's totally not needed. Do you know what I mean? And that, when you think about it, is what most boardrooms look like, right? What a lot of our industry look like is a bunch of people sat around agreeing with each other. Half of you ain't needed there, I'm afraid. So it's like, bring people in who've got different experience, who come from a different background, who can, from whatever, neuro, from disability, ability, from whatever it might be. I think that is where we end up having a richer, more diverse, more, better industry. I've got a bit of a difficult question, but it's a good question. And I'm going to ask Helen and Maria to help answer this to kind of together, or, I'm not sure how that works together, but you know what I mean. Somebody says here they've chosen to be anonymous, which is totally cool and encouraged in a way. The death of Sarah Everard really struck women, loads of noise, protests, police brutality, police as per usual acted terribly. It seemed like there was a lot more noise, and a lot more positive noise, if that's the thing, versus the BLM protest, which was a lot of negative noise. And I guess we don't hear about as many Black women who've been killed, have gone missing, although the stats suggest it's very similar in terms of numbers. And I guess, how do women have those conversations? And, I think the person who's asked this question, and I don't totally get it, because I'm not a woman, I'm not sure what your background is, but being heard, but maybe being ignored, and how do we start to unpick that? And I don't know who wants to go first, but it would be good to get your thoughts on it, team, really. You're going to both be too polite. Maria, go.
I'm happy to go. I can talk about it from, I guess, more of a personal perspective, and also what I think some of the solutions might be, although I did promise Liam that there might not be a neat solution to this answer. I feel you, right? I absolutely feel you. I feel like society has become more willing to listen to women about the issues that affect us, and has started, although I would suggest some of the media coverage of the Sarah Everard case has revealed that there is still a latent amount of misogyny about how women should take care of themselves and men can just go along and keep doing what they do, which is not what should be happening. But I think society has reached a level of comfort with talking about gender, right? And the conversation about race is probably about 15 to 20 years behind. And actually, people would rather we didn't talk about it. Basically, that's kind of the upshot that I guess is like, it's awkward. And often you find yourself as a person of color or as an ethnic minority, I don't know if anyone else has this, approaching the conversation really carefully so as not to make people uncomfortable, to try and facilitate their way through the conversation, so that you get the desired response that you kind of want and need. And that is absolutely exhausting. And it's, again, to the point of Megan, it's a basic reality that you see that Black women of color are not treated the same in the media. Our bodies are judged, our health is judged. Everything is judged in a very different way. The way that I've been describing it, when people are sort of saying, well, Megan's, is they both ate avocado toast and only one person was accused of trying to take down society because of it. And again, this comes back, I think, to a sense of white fragility, right? To accept that racism, and I'm going to call it racism, occurs, right? To the point where we're ignoring Black murders of Black women, or we're ignoring the fact that more Black women die in childbirth. We're willing to ignore those statistics. That is a form of racism. again, it comes back to white fragility and asking people to deconstruct their view of the world, their very comfortable view of the world and their view of themselves as non-racists. And we're asking them to become anti-racist. And so that's an ongoing conversation, right? And I don't think that sits with individual Black people to have those arguments. That sits with societies, that sits with organizations to create an expected standard of what we acknowledge. And the Stop Asian Hate campaign movement that's been going on at the moment, we've deliberately acknowledged that internally, and it's important that we do that. There is an excellent book I would recommend for those people in your life that you feel comfortable recommending it to. It's called Me and White Supremacy. And it's by Laila Saad, and it's for white people to read, and it's like an exercise book. You do like an exercise a day for X amount of days. My other half, who is white, he read it and was actually fairly traumatized. So I think it's doing its job. But they have to work on themselves, right, to reach the level that they need to be at to be able to have that conversation.
Thanks, Bria. No, that's great. I was just moaning about the police sirens that go mental outside my house today. Hels, do you have a build on that? And I guess interesting to hear your take on why is it noisier about Sarah Everard, as tragic as it is? Why is there more interest? Why is it bigger? What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard one, and because the answer is it's not right. It's not fair and it's not right. And I think just acknowledging that first is kind of really important. I think there's systemic issues within our press and our media, unfortunately. And I think, we know that there's misogyny, we know that there's racism. And I think then when you get them combined, it doesn't work out so well. I think, Maria, you just summed it up really nicely, right? I think you kind of said that, the issue of racism had long been ignored by a lot of people in society. I think the issue of gender equality and the oppression of women had long been forgotten by a lot of people in society. A lot of people I spoke to in the wake of Sarah's tragic death and the kind of outpouring of how people felt in the wake of it was that many people were surprised in that they were like, but I thought gender equality was that was been ticked off. It's like, unfortunately it has not, and it is and that was a response not just from some males that I would know. So I think, unfortunately, the person that put that question in, I think the reason you're feeling the way you are is because you're feeling both ignored and forgotten. And that's why it's, that's what I mean. It's just not right and it's not fair. And I think hopefully the positives that come out of this is the recognition of that and the acknowledgement that things aren't right and that things have to change for the better.
Thanks, Hal. Sorry, struggling with my mute button now. I think we all definitely acknowledge that things need to change for the better, and the intersectionality is something that is becoming much more talked about than ever, and is crucial about how you break it all down, right? You fix one thing, it's a bit like whack-a-mole, but actually if we try and fix all of the things, then I don't know what's happening in Blackheath today. Anyway, great answers. Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Hels. I've got a question, Dina, about allyship and about its bloody tiring. And the one thing I would say, it's tiring being an ally. Try being the person that's being allied for, right? And sorry if I took the words out of your mouth, but I had to say it because I get it, but it's a true thing, right? People are tiring, it's difficult, it's sticking your head above the parapet. What do you think about that, Dina?
I mean, I 100% agree, and that's the first thing I thought. Of course, it's tiring to do something that's new. It's tiring if that's your lived experience. I'm 40. It's been my lived experience for 40 years. So yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to hear. Again, I'm going to go back to last week, was incredibly challenging for me to be in conversations with white women saying, I find that I couldn't watch the interview because I find the whole conversation exhausting. I find what's going on in social media exhausting, so I'm going to take a break. Glad that you are able to take a break. And this is what I'm talking about with allyship being about coalition and collaboration other than a badge for that individual. If you are committed to equity, let's forget equality, equity, which we're probably not going to achieve in our lifetimes, but is the right end goal. It is a constant responsibility of each individual. And I think if it's not that person's place. I saw the question, it's not your place to educate, but it's your, I think that we are in the position to be really open and frank and say, you know, it's exhausting for you, but how do you think it feels for me? And if you're going to bow out now, you're saying that I need to do the work again. So where are we really? And how committed to you about societal change? I think that we have to. I'm a huge person that always talks in every walk of my life about accountability, and individual accountability is very important. And when we talk about allyship, it's individual accountability. So I would honestly have an honest conversation and say, you don't get to be tired.
No, fair. And do you know what? We don't get to be tired, unfortunately. And I think that we just need to keep going. And you're absolutely right. I wondered, linked to that, Dina, and I know you've talked about it before, you know, people who'd say I'm a feminist, but then they struggle to see the race. And it ties into a bit about what you were saying, but I wondered if you wanted to build on that a little bit more.
Yeah. This topic, I talk about, and I try to be careful about what I say, but I find that when we talk about feminism, we have to be really honest in the fact that feminism so far has benefited white women. It hasn't benefited all women. Now, if you're a true feminist, no matter your gender, it is about the intersectionality of all women. And if it's not working for all, then it's not working. It's not it's benefiting some, so that's the right way to be. And I think that, again, it's about being uncomfortable with the truths of the situation. As Maria said, we don't like talking about race. We definitely don't like talking about privilege within feminism, and we need to. I know that I come with elements of my identity are of privilege, right? I am accepting of that, and I need to use that for people that are not exactly the same as me. It's not about, okay, well, once all black women that look like me are fine, then that means that the work is done. No, it has to be all black women. Do you understand what I mean? So I always challenge that feminism so far, we really, really need to unpack and be accountable as a society that this hasn't worked so far. Yeah. And we need to take a different approach. But I'd love to know what the rest of the panel think about this.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dina.
Sorry to take over, William. I didn't mean it like that.
No. Do you know what? You can always take over, and you definitely do a better job than I will with less sirens. Priscilla, I don't know whether you've got any builds on that, and whether, you know, you and your friends group, or, you know, people you spend time with, do they see things in individual pillars, or is it the whole thing needs to be solved at one time? That's a rubbish question, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I do know what you mean. I think it's hard, isn't it? Because I think if you want to affect real change, you really have to be specific about what the problem is. And so sometimes that means going a little bit more granular. But that's not to say that this isn't an issue that we're all experiencing, and therefore we should all bind together and do, as Dina said, and work as a coalition to create change. But yeah, I do think it's really important to understand the difference in people's experiences so that everything is not swept into one. And then essentially some people are suffering more than others.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is something that we come back to time and time again, right? It's that we have to be honest about the groups that need. That's why I like the equity thing, right? We've all seen the things that do the rounds on social media. It's not equality, it's equity. We need to level the playing field, but everybody needs a bigger box. If you're my height, you need a really big box, right, to get over the fence. But, you know, I think it's really important to see that some people need more focus, some groups might do, but equally, if we need to work together to drive it forward. Look, we're kind of running out of time, unfortunately, today, and I knew this would be a fantastic group of brilliant panelists. I won't call you female panelists, you're just brilliant panelists and brilliant examples of role models, and, you know, doing great work in your respective companies. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everyone who registered. I know a lot of people are watching this on catch up. I know we had well over 120 people registered today. It's fantastic to see you all live. Quick shout out, we've had a bunch of brilliant people. absolutely revitalizing our MIFA mentoring scheme, and tomorrow is the last day of application. So if you would like to be a MIFA mentee because you work in the media ad industry, you're from a Black, Asian and other minority ethnic background, you live and work in the UK, we've had loads of people from America wanting to join. Unfortunately, this is a UK scheme at the moment. If you want to be supported, encouraged and championed, and if you want to be mentored by a brilliant MIFA role model, then please apply. I'll drop the link in the notes. We're also looking for a few more people of colour to be mentors, MIFA mentors. So again, if you'd like to be a mentor, again, please get in touch with anyone here, or again, I'll drop notes in the box. So it starts in April. It's going to be absolutely brilliant this year. There's some brilliant people running it. So thank you for everything you're doing there. Just wanted to say that the April MIFA Matters is going to be focused on advertisers and brands, and some of what we've all talked about today is about how what we do. Hel's talked about it, and Priscilla talked about it, everybody talked about it, right? How what we do and where it shows up, how much of an impact it has. Advertiser money pays the bills, money makes decisions, they decide the agencies they work with, they decide what the work that gets signed off. All of that we know needs to be much more inclusive, and we know that there's a real opportunity to understand and unpick that. So we're going to be joined by marketeers from Diageo, from Dunelm, from Sky, and we're going to also have a load of our awesome MIFA mentors showing up too. So again, I'll very quickly drop the link to register in the side panel, if I can do it quickly enough, and I'll very quickly drop in the mentoring program as well. So hopefully those of you that are interested can click on those various links before I close this. I won't close it straight away like I normally do. All that's left to say is thank you again to the brilliant panelists. Thank you for an awesome, authentic chat, discussion, debate. Thank you very much for everyone that showed up, and we'll see you all in about a month. Thanks ever so much. See you later. Cheers, guys.